Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. With macroeconomic uncertainty across markets, hiring costs, and so much more now firmly top of mind, CEOs and leaders across businesses are now focused on efficient growth and cost savings and increased productivity. Sounds easy when written down, doesn't it? It's a lot harder to achieve than that. And as a result, companies are turning to automation more than ever to drive immediate value across every aspect of their business, from technical to non-technical departments like sales, customer service, marketing and commerce, etc. And as a result, new research reveals that automation demand has surged in more than 90% of companies. So to understand how IT are approaching these demands and some of the challenges they face, I invited Matt McLarty from Mulesoft onto the podcast to learn more about that research and how organisations that thrive in the digital economy are the ones that adapt to the changes the fastest. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Vancouver, where we're going to speak with Matt right now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Matt McLarty. I'm the Global Field CTO for Mulesoft, and I also run an organization here called the Digital Transformation Office. So what we do is work with organizations around the globe who are digitally transforming, which doesn't really narrow it down these days. Like, everybody's in some state of digital transformation, but we really help them with their strategies, digital strategies, and identify the ways that automation, integration, and APIs can help them really not only solve their current priorities from a digital transformation perspective, but also pave the road to a very agile, scalable future.
And a question I've got to ask, before we started recording today, we were just getting to know one another a little bit, and you were talking about you've got your own podcast, you're a musician, and obviously you've got your work with technology and this digital transformation initiative you were just talking about. If I was to take you way, way back, can you remember where your love of technology came from and what put you on this path?
Yeah, that's a great, I'm a child of the 80s, I would say, as a kid. So, what seemed high tech then, we might laugh at now, but we had a home computer, a Texas Instruments TI-99 computer. We had even a little speech synthesizer module. And so, I always liked building stuff. I liked building Lego. And so this was just another thing to build with. To tie the music thing together, the first thing I remember programming was a set of Christmas carols at Christmas time. I programmed the computer to play Christmas carols and do little holiday graphics. So I guess it all sort of sprung from there.
Man, love it. What a great story. And fast forward to 2022. And of course, automation has been on the rise since the pandemic. But I'm also increasingly reading about the fears of technical debt that's holding organizations back. I'm curious, you're right in the heart of all this. Do you think this is a trend that's just going to continue to grow?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is companies that started adopting technology the earliest are encumbered with what we're calling technical debt. So, technical debt is really the things that I look at it as the things that are getting in the way of really innovating and moving forward. You've got, the number of applications that you have, and the amount of infrastructure you have, especially around stuff that seems out of date or is hard to change. So I really think that the companies who've figured this all out are the ones that sort of embrace the complexity. Like no one's going to, every organization's IT landscape is going to keep getting more and more complex. But it's those companies that figure out that it's not about implementing the one great thing that's going to solve all the problems. It's about developing the muscle to constantly change, being able to constantly add new things and even retire old things. I was actually part of the Forbes Technology Council and did a piece recently, and they're asking, what should you measure in an organization? I said, well, there's lots of things to measure, but one thing you should measure is actually how much tech are you retiring How much tech are you getting away from? And so, as what's interesting through the pandemic, I think, is companies really rallied to get stuff done quickly. A lot of companies that maybe had struggled for a while saying, oh, we don't have time to do these things. They were able to deliver really quickly because they just had to. It was a survival thing. But in doing that, they were layering on more and more tech. So more and more potential technical debt. Companies that are able to recognize that their ability to change and adapt, it's kind of like Darwinian principles, right? The survival is the ones that adapt, not necessarily the strongest. It's more like the most adaptable. That's really, the most important thing for organizations when it comes to technology.
And one of the reasons I invited you on the podcast today was I recently read in Mulesoft's research that I think the figure was 80% of organizations are worried that restructuring application and data landscapes to support automation will just further compound that technical debt. So can you tell me more about the report and who it was you surveyed there?
Yeah, we surveyed about 600 IT and business leaders, and we run a series of reports. I think this was an interesting one focused on automation because, so many of the customers that we work with, that's their focus. Like, especially now as we're in, I refuse to use the term post-pandemic, but let's say more than 2 years into the pandemic, wherever we may be, I think that the automation is on everyone's mind because people are wanting to do more with less. They're trying to make sure that they can get the most out of the investment. So that just means, how do we remove the mundane tasks? How do we make our employees more productive? How do we even empower more of our employees to build stuff themselves? But I think what we saw during the pandemic is that a lot of the work that was done in a hurry. And when you're in a hurry, sometimes you're not necessarily thinking through what the long-term implications are going to be. And so companies have now come out of that first wave of dealing with the pandemic, happy with themselves that they did all this work quickly, but also now wondering, what are they going to do with this new stuff that in some cases actually made the technical debt worse because it's another layer of technology and it might be building dependencies on the old stuff that they were trying to get rid of. So I think that's where a lot of the concerns are coming from.
And one of the other big highlights for me in the report was that the outdated integration strategies are also hindering automation. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, Mulesoft's heritage, we've always been helping companies connect things and integrate things. And, I think we sort of uniquely were prioritizing doing integration in a certain way. So historically, a lot of integration is done where you take system A and just plug it together with system B. Well, that can solve that initial pain point. But what happens when system C comes along or another project comes along? What was happening is that the more systems that get connected just point to point that way, the more you're actually slowing things down project by project. And so, having observed best practices, we've been promoting this idea, what we call API-led connectivity, which you can sort of generalize as, rather than just plugging systems together, think about what the business capabilities are in your IT environment, expose those through reusable interfaces, plug and play type interfaces that then allow new things to be composed using the things that you just enabled through those reusable interfaces. And so that what we found as well is, like, in doing that work, in helping companies integrate and supporting that, a lot of the times what they were doing is trying to automate things. So the really integration and support of automation. And so, companies that haven't kind of crossed that composable threshold of embracing that way of doing things are finding that, again, they might be able to automate a single process, or even sometimes just automate the happy path of a single process. But when it comes to scenarios where there's an exception, or scenarios where they want to add on a new user channel or a new business process, that they have to do a whole bunch of rework all over again. Whereas the companies that take that composable approach of saying, let's surface all of the business capabilities that we have and make them pluggable. I mentioned Lego. I like to play Lego as a kid. It's kind of like building the Lego set for your company. Now you can build all sorts of new stuff using the same parts.
Love that. And bearing in mind everything that we've just talked about there, one of the other things that really stood out was this almost misalignment in approach. Well, because I think there was 80% of organizations saying that they will have hyper-automation on their technology roadmap within the next 24 months. I mean, what did you take away from that?
Yeah, I think that there's, in a lot of organizations, there's always there can be a gulf between strategy and execution, right? And so I've talked to organizations where they've said, our business is telling us that, there's one insurance company I talked to, they're saying, like, our business is telling us 40% of our transactions need to be through indirect channels. We need to be more partner focused in the future. So they need to drive that number up. Like, that's the business strategy. Yet the funding for IT was all around, like, replacing their old ERP systems and migrating to the latest version. There's a big mismatch there. So, I think one of the things that we're very focused on at Mulesoft, and I think we've cracked the nut on this, is being able to be bold and think broadly, but break the strategy down into, I talked about composable architecture in the IT landscape, but almost a composable strategy to say, actually, if that's the vision you want to get to, then let's find the path. What are the piece parts that are going to get you to that vision? And we actually do these workshops with our customers where we start there. We start with the big picture, and we look at some innovation opportunities, and are actually able to do that. When we get into breaking it down into what are the steps you need to take to get there, all of a sudden the light bulbs go on, because people realize, okay, well, if I take that capability that's needed for this future scenario, it's actually quite useful now for this near-term project that I have. Like maybe in the future I want to have super personalized customer experiences using machine learning algorithms to find it. But actually today, if I built this particular customer information API, that's actually useful just in doing some targeted marketing campaigns that I need to do this year. Now I can see that by what I'm going to do this year is actually going to help me get to that big vision.
And I'm curious, from the conversations you've been having, are there any particular departments that are having the highest demand for automation?
Yeah, I mean, if we maybe we shouldn't put IT aside. Obviously, IT is a big one in terms of just putting the capabilities in place. But we've seen operations departments that are focused on just optimizing the core processes of an organization. We've seen customer service organizations, especially in terms of really empowering those individuals in customer support to have everything at their fingertips, and helping companies avoid that situation where you're trying to get help online and then you phone in the call center, and then you wonder why you called in because they're telling you the same thing. Actually helping empower those call center agents so that they've got much more information, much more actionable data at their fingertips. Marketing teams, I just mentioned an example there, where there's a lot of, there's still a lot of companies out there that are, just sending blanket emails across the board to all their customers or prospects, and that, you almost hurt yourself from a brand perspective. So, being able to synthesize all the data points and come up with much more relevant and actionable communication to customers. So it really does cut across all the functions of business now. And I think the pandemic was certainly a forcing function there. Like for any companies that were lagging on digital capabilities in their whatever departments, like they just had to step up.
And as someone that lives and breathes this space, I'm curious, did anything in the report surprise you at all?
I think, I don't know. I feel like me in my seat, I've been talked to so many companies. It's hardly anything surprises me now. And it's not so much the data in the report surprises me. I feel like, what surprises me, maybe I'm too cynical because I've seen a lot of stuff, but maybe the things that surprise me are usually on the positive side. Like I love having my sort of thinking proven wrong when I having worked with so many companies and really, sympathizing with the people at these companies, because everybody's working hard. Everybody's trying to innovate. I work with IT people who are, trying to push that innovation agenda with their business people who may be a little risk averse. I work with business people who are diving into the technology to really understand it better. So I just get those nice surprises where I see companies that, you might on the surface think of them as old school, but you get in there, there's some amazing technology innovation that's happening in companies. One of the stories that we've talked about recently for Mulesoft is with actually with Bayer Crop Science. So the arm of Bayer, who's an agricultural focused on agriculture. And you think, okay, farming, you think of farming as this nice pastoral vision of people in the fields and very low tech, getting into nature. But it's unbelievable how high tech farming is now, and the amount of data that can be applied there. And we've done a lot of work with Bayer on helping them optimize their processes to just drive this incredible scale around agriculture and supporting their clients. So I think maybe that's it. Maybe that's the big surprise for me, is just how much innovation and technology is actually happening in these companies that you might not think of as being tech savvy.
And I suspect, as we discuss all the ins and outs of that report and some of the challenges that are being experienced all over the world, there'll be a lot of people listening in businesses that are just nodding their head in agreement, saying, "Yeah, that's us." So the big question has to be: how are you helping businesses overcome some of these challenges?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we have the leading platform on integration, automation, APIs. So we've got a great technology foundation. I think one of the things that's very special about Mulesoft and Salesforce, we're part of Salesforce, is that we don't just come in and say, "Here's the tech, plug it in, away you go." Right? We have we're constantly bringing in the experiences of our customers to inform ourselves and share best practices. And we have a customer success organization that's incredible, working with companies to help them address their organizational needs, address their, establish the right methodologies for how to think about things. How do you build an innovation practice, a sustainable innovation practice for the organization? We've got a customer advisory team that also can work in partnership. So it's really covering the people, process, technology gamut, and really based on our experiences working with real companies.
And we've heard all the challenges that businesses are going through, and we've heard the insights from the reporters. But if we zoom out for a moment, what's your focus at Mulesoft right now? Where do you go from here?
Yeah, I think that we're evolving too, right? So we're what we've found is we started in the integration space and working with a lot of technologists and architects, and we still do that. But we're just finding that the value proposition that we really had around helping organizations break things down into these plug and play capabilities, is that value proposition is just becoming more universal in our customer base. So I'm both working with customers on helping them on those journeys, and also working across the whole organization. And we're all evolving to bring the message to these new audiences, and we actually have, what I think is really exciting, we have new products as well, which are more, not so much even focused on technology, like IT users, but business users themselves. And so one of the trends that we've seen coming out of the pandemic is business and IT working a lot more closely together, and more business people being hands-on with the technology, because the demand for digital solutions just keeps going up, up, up. You can't keep relying on the small slice of the world that are software developers. So we now have tools that are helping empower business users to actually build their own automations. And this is true across all of Salesforce. So I'm doing a lot of work to help empower our customers, new personas, and even enable our own teams to work with those groups.
Well, we started the podcast talking about your origin story, where your passion for tech came from. And since then, we've talked about how you've evolved, the business has evolved, your customers have evolved, and also talking about some of the big insights. Before I let you go, as we come full circle, I always like to ask my guests to leave everyone listening on a personal note of inspiration. So is there a song that means something to you that we can add to our Spotify playlist, or a book that has inspired you that we can add to our Amazon wish list? All I'm going to ask is, what are you going to choose? And is there a story behind your choice too?
I'll give a book and a song. I mean, I would say that the book would be Thinking in Systems, which is by Donella Meadows. It's a book about, I think it's called a primer. So it is a introduction to systems thinking, which I found sort of revolutionary in my own mind, not only for work, but for life, about, really approaching the world as a connected system and the behaviors around systems. So that one is just, I think, applicable in my job working with architects at big companies as it is being a parent of of kids who have their own song. I'm a guitarist, so I'll go with "Are You Experienced" by Jimi Hendrix, because it's a good question to keep asking yourself, right? When in the tech world, the goalposts are always moving. So when you think you know everything, there's just more to learn.
Well, I'll add the book to our Amazon wish list. And man, what a tune to end on as well. You've ended on a real high, a classic there. But finally, for anyone listening that wants to find out more about the report that we've discussed today, the work you're doing at Mulesoft, or even check out your podcast too and contact your team, what's the best starting point for everything?
Well, the best starting point is mulesoft.com, where you actually have links to the report, links to the podcast. I always love connecting with people. So I'm Matt McLarty, BC on LinkedIn and Twitter and wherever else. The podcast is called APIs Unplugged, and it's on all the usual channels. But I think reach out, love to connect.
Awesome. I'll add those links to the show notes, and I personally will be checking out APIs Unplugged too. So you got yourself a new listener there. But so much I've loved about chatting with you today, and all the insights from that report. Some pretty big takeaways for me on there, and also the work that you're doing. But more than anything, it was your personal story that brought it all to life. Not to mention leaving us with a Jimi Hendrix track. So thank you for sharing that with me today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Neil.
Wow, we covered so much there, and I suspect that many of what we talked about resonated with you and your business. So I'd love to hear more about how you're turning these challenges into opportunities, and maybe a few lessons that you've learned along the way that you could pass on to everyone listening. And whether you want to do that through an email, through techblogwriter@outlook.com, or sending me a DM on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, etc. at Neil C. Hughes. Whatever's easiest for you, please get a message to me, whether it be written, whether it be a text message, whether it be a voice message that we can play on here, or if you'd like to come on the podcast and join me, we can do it all. So keep the old messages coming in, and I'll be back tomorrow with another guest. So just a big thank you for listening as always. Keep your messages coming in, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.